remember the exact moment Mrs. Aldridge looked at my son like he was nothing. We were sitting in her classroom for a parent-teacher meeting, those tiny plastic chairs digging into my legs. Noah sat beside me, quiet as always, his hands folded in his lap. She didn't even look at him when she said it. "Your son just doesn't have the mind for science, Mr. Peterson." Her tone was flat, final, like she was reading a weather report. Some children simply aren't built for analytical thinking. I felt Noah flinch beside me. I wanted to argue to defend him, but the words stuck in my throat. She shuffled her papers, dismissing us without another glance. As we walked out into the hallway, I heard her laugh with another teacher. The sound followed us all the way to the parking lot. I looked down at Noah. His face was blank, but I saw the way his jaw tightened. That night I made a promise to myself. One day she would regret those words. The drive home was the longest 15 minutes of my life. Noah stared out the window, his reflection pale against the glass. I tried to fill the silence with reassurances, telling him teachers didn't know everything, that he was smart in ways they couldn't measure. But he didn't respond. When we pulled into the driveway, he finally spoke. "Dad, what if she's right?" His voice cracked on the last word. I turned off the engine and sat there, gripping the steering wheel. That question broke something in me. Not anger, not frustration, just a deep, aching sadness. My son, my brilliant, curious boy, believed he wasn't good enough because one teacher decided he wasn't worth her time. I reached over and squeezed his shoulder. "She's not right," I said quietly. "And we're going to prove it." He nodded, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. That doubt became the seed of everything that came next. The next afternoon, I arrived early to pick Noah up from school. I parked near the staff entrance and saw two teachers standing by the door, coffee cups in hand. One of them was Mrs. Aldridge. I rolled down my window slightly, just enough to hear. "The old mechanic thinks his boy's a genius," one of them said, laughing. Mrs. Aldridge smirked. "He's delusional. That child barely passes my class." They walked inside, still chuckling. I sat there, hands trembling on the wheel. So it wasn't just her. It was all of them. They had written Noah off, labeled him, filed him away under not worth the effort. When Noah climbed into the car, I smiled like nothing was wrong. But inside I was burning. That night I realized something important. If the school wouldn't believe in my son, I would. And I'd make sure the world saw what they refused to see. 2 weeks later, Noah brought home his report card. I opened it at the kitchen table while he stood beside me, chewing his thumbnail. Science. D-. The teacher's comment was printed neatly below the grade. Lack of focus. Minimal potential. I read it 3 times, each word landing like a punch. Minimal potential. I looked at Noah. He was staring at the floor, shoulders hunched like he was trying to disappear. I set the paper down carefully, folding it along the crease. "Then we'll start over," I said. "Together." He looked up at me, confused. "What do you mean?" I stood and walked to the garage door. "Come on. I want to show you something." He followed me slowly, hesitantly. I flicked on the light. The garage smelled like oil and sawdust, tools hanging neatly on the walls. "This," I said, gesturing around, "is where we're going to build your future." Our garage became a classroom. Every evening after dinner, Noah and I would sit on the concrete floor, surrounded by old engines, bolts, and instruction manuals I'd saved from my years as a mechanic. I started simple. I took apart a broken fan and laid the pieces out in front of him. "Tell me what you see," I said. First he just shrugged. But I waited. Slowly he pointed to the motor. "That's what makes it spin." "Right. And what makes the motor work?" He frowned, thinking. "Electricity." He nodded. "And where does the electricity come from?" We spent an hour tracing the path of energy, from the outlet to the blades. By the end, Noah was asking questions I didn't expect. "Could you make it run on something else? Like wind?" Smiled. "You tell me." For the first time in weeks, I saw a spark in his eyes. That night, I knew we were onto something. Noah started spending every spare moment in the garage. He sketched designs on cardboard, measured wire lengths, asked me questions that made me pull out my old engineering textbooks. One Saturday, he built a small wind turbine from spare parts. It wasn't perfect. The blades wobbled, and the base was uneven. But when he set it near the open garage door and the breeze caught it, the tiny LED bulb lit up. Noah stared at it, mouth open. "I did that," he whispered. "You did," I said, my chest tight with pride. He brought it to school the next Monday, setting it carefully on his desk before class. I watched him carry it in, hopeful and nervous. When I picked him up that afternoon, his hands were empty. "Where's your project?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. Finally he said, "I don't know. It was gone by lunch." 2 days later, Noah came home pale and quiet. I asked him what was wrong. He shook his head, said nothing happened. But the next morning I got a call from another parent. "Did you hear? Mrs. Aldridge's favorite student just won the class science prize. For a wind turbine." My blood ran cold. I hung up and drove straight to the school. I found Mrs. Aldridge in her classroom, erasing the board. "We need to talk," I said. She turned, eyebrows raised. "Mr. Peterson, what can I do for you?" Kept my voice steady. "My son built a wind turbine. It went missing. Now another kid has won a prize for the same design." She sighed like I was wasting her time. "Maybe you should stop building your son's projects for him." That line hit like a slap. "I didn't build it. He did." She smiled thinly. "Sure." I left before I said something I'd regret. But that smirk stayed with me. I went to the principal's office the next day. Mr. Harmon listened politely, hands folded on his desk. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. "Mr. Peterson, I understand your concern. But Mrs. Aldridge has 30 years of experience. She's one of our most respected educators. She's protecting a student who stole my son's work," I said. He shook his head. "That's a serious accusation. Do you have proof?" I didn't. Just Noah's word, and apparently that wasn't enough. "I suggest you let this go," Mr. Harmon said gently. "These things happen. Kids borrow ideas." I stood jaw tight. "This isn't over." He smiled politely. "Have a good day, Mr. Peterson." I walked out feeling smaller than I had in years. But my resolve didn't shrink. It hardened. If they wouldn't listen, I'd make them. For weeks, Noah and I worked in the garage every night. The hum of the soldering iron became a familiar sound. We built circuits, tested motors, sketched blueprints on old graph paper. I taught him everything I knew about mechanics, and he taught me things I'd forgotten. How to see problems as puzzles. How to be patient. One evening, he looked up from a battery he was wiring and said, "Dad, do you think I'm smart?" I set down my wrench. "I know you are." He nodded slowly, but I could see he didn't fully believe it yet. That was okay. Belief takes time. We kept working. The garage smelled like sawdust and metal, and in that small, cluttered space, something bigger than both of us was taking shape. Not just a project. Future. A few months later, I saw a flyer for the county fair's junior science competition. The prize was small, just a ribbon and $50, but it was a chance. I showed it to Noah. "What do you think?" He stared at the flyer, chewing his lip. "What if they don't like it?" "Then we'll build something better next time," I said. He nodded. "Okay." We spent 3 weeks building a water filtration system from PVC pipes, sand, and activated charcoal. It wasn't fancy, but it worked. On the day of the fair, Noah carried it to the judging table himself. I stood in the back watching. When they announced the winners, Noah took second place. The crowd clapped. He looked at me, eyes wide, and I gave him a thumbs up. Then I saw her, Mrs. Aldridge, sitting at the judges' table. She didn't clap. She just sat there, arms folded, face blank. 2 weeks after the fair, I got a letter from the school. Noah was being accused of parent-assisted cheating, in extracurricular science work. No name was attached to the complaint. It was anonymous. I read it 3 times, hands shaking. Noah saw my face and asked what was wrong. I folded the letter and forced a smile. Nothing. Just school stuff. But he knew. That night I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. I had no proof, but I knew exactly who filed that report. Mrs. Aldridge wasn't just dismissive. She was actively trying to stop him. The question was why? What did she gain from breaking a kid's spirit? I didn't have an answer. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let her win. One Saturday, I took Noah to the public library for a robotics workshop. He was nervous, standing in the doorway while other kids filed in. "You'll be fine," I said. He nodded and went inside. An hour later, I peeked through the window. Noah was bent over a table, soldering wires with an older man in a faded denim shirt. The man was pointing at something, explaining. Noah nodded, focused. When the session ended, the man walked out with Noah. "Your boy's got talent," he said, extending a hand. "I'm Richard Coldwell, retired NASA engineer." I shook his hand, stunned. "NASA?" He chuckled. "Long time ago. But I know potential when I see it. Your son's got something special." Noah beamed. For the first time in months, someone other than me believed in him. Coldwell handed me his card. "Bring him by next week. I'd like to work with him." Under Coldwell's guidance, Noah transformed. They met twice a week at the library's tech lab. Coldwell taught him coding, circuit design, and engineering principles I couldn't explain if I tried. Noah's school grades stayed low. Mrs. Aldridge still marked him harshly, still wrote dismissive comments on his assignments. But his real-world skills soared. One evening, Noah showed me a blueprint he'd drawn. "It's a renewable energy prototype," he said. "For the district fair." I studied the design. It was brilliant, complex but achievable. "What are you going to call it?" I asked. He grinned. "The Peterson Pulse." I laughed, surprised. "Seriously?" "It's ours, Dad. Yours and mine." I nodded, throat tight. "Then let's build it." We spent every spare moment on that project. It became more than science. It became proof. Proof that we were more than what Mrs. Aldridge believed. The district fair was 3 months away. Noah worked obsessively, refining every detail. Coldwell checked in weekly, offering guidance but letting Noah lead. I watched him grow more confident, more sure of himself. Then 2 weeks before the fair I got an email. It was from the fair coordinator. "Noah Peterson's entry has been suspended pending review of parental interference claims." My stomach dropped. I called the coordinator immediately. "Who made the complaint?" "It's anonymous," she said. But the concerns were serious enough to warrant investigation. I hung up and sat in silence. Noah came home an hour later, excited to show me a new adjustment he'd made. I didn't know how to tell him. When I finally did, he crumbled. "I'm done," he whispered. "I can't do this anymore." I knelt beside him. "We don't quit. We prove." I spent the next 3 days compiling evidence. Every notebook Noah had filled. Every time-stamped photo of him working. Every video I'd taken of our garage sessions. I organized it into a folder and submitted it to the appeals panel. On the day of the hearing, Coldwell showed up unannounced. "Heard you might need a witness," he said. I could have hugged him. The panel reviewed the evidence while Mrs. Aldridge sat in the corner, arms crossed. When Coldwell testified about Noah's skills and work ethic, her expression tightened. The panel deliberated for 20 minutes. When they returned, the head coordinator spoke. "Noah Peterson's entry is reinstated. All charges are dismissed." Noah exhaled beside me. Mrs. Aldridge stood abruptly and left without a word. But I saw it. The crack in her armor. For the first time, she looked rattled. A week later, Coldwell pulled me aside. "There's something you should know," he said quietly. "Mrs. Aldridge's nephew was also competing. She's been mentoring him privately." I stared at him. "What?" He nodded. I've seen the kids work. It's good, but it's derivative. She's been pushing hard for him to win. Suddenly everything made sense. The stolen project. The anonymous complaints. The constant dismissal of Noah. It wasn't about education. It was personal. She wanted her nephew to succeed. And Noah was in the way. I felt anger rise in my chest, hot and sharp. But I pushed it down. Getting angry wouldn't help. Winning would. The day of the district fair arrived. The gymnasium was packed with students, parents, and judges. Noah set up his display carefully. Hands steady despite his nerves. The Peterson Pulse sat on the table, sleek and functional. Judges moved through the rows, stopping at each project. When they reached Noah's, they lingered. Questions. Took notes. Mrs. Aldridge stood near her nephew's table, watching. Her nephew had built a solar panel array. It was impressive, but it lacked originality. I saw her whisper something to him, saw him nod. When the judges moved on, she glanced at Noah's table. Our eyes met across the room. I didn't look away. Neither did she. Later that afternoon they announced the winners. Third place went to a water conservation model. Second place went to Mrs. Aldridge's nephew. And first place went to Noah Peterson. The crowd erupted. Noah turned to me, eyes wide, disbelieving. I nodded, grinning. Mrs. Aldridge's nephew stormed off. She stood frozen, face pale. As we packed up, Mrs. Aldridge approached. "Congratulations," she said stiffly. Noah thanked her politely. I extended my hand. "Guess he surprised you, huh?" He shook it briefly. Her smile was thin, trembling at the edges. "Indeed." She walked away quickly. I watched her go, feeling something I hadn't expected. Not triumph. Just sadness. She'd spent so much energy tearing down a child, and for what? To protect her own pride. Later, Caldwell clapped me on the shoulder. "You raised a good kid, Jack." I looked at Noah, who was laughing with another competitor. "He raised himself," I said. "I just gave him space to grow." 3 weeks later, a thick envelope arrived in the mail. I opened it at the kitchen table while Noah ate cereal. Inside was an embossed invitation. "You have been selected to attend the National Young Innovators Gala." I read it twice, hands shaking. "Noah." He looked up, mouth full. "Yeah." I handed him the letter. He read it slowly. Then he set down his spoon, eyes wide. "Is this real?" "It's real." He stood pacing. "The National Gala. That's huge." I nodded, unable to speak. "She said you'd never be anything," I thought. Guess we proved her wrong. Noah looked at me, grinning. "We did it, Dad." I pulled him into a hug. "You did it." Word spread quickly. The local paper ran a story about Noah's achievement. Parents at school congratulated me. Teachers who'd ignored him suddenly remembered his name. But Mrs. Aldridge stayed silent. I didn't see her for weeks. Then one morning I heard rumors. Whispers about a conflict of interest. About her nephew's involvement. About ethical concerns. I didn't start the rumors. But I didn't stop them either. One afternoon I walked past her classroom. She was alone grading papers. She glanced up, saw me, and looked away quickly. Kept walking. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The truth had done the work for me. The gala was held in our district's auditorium, the same building where that horrible parent-teacher meeting had happened years ago. The irony wasn't lost on me. I wore my only suit, the one I'd bought for my brother's wedding. Noah wore a button-down shirt and tie. He looked older, more confident. We arrived early. The auditorium was transformed with banners, lights, and rows of chairs. Parents filled the seats. I saw Mrs. Aldridge sitting near the front, alone. My heart pounded. Noah saw her too. "Dad," he said quietly. "I want to do something." I looked at him. "What?" He pulled an envelope from his pocket. "I wrote her a letter. Can I give it to her?" He hesitated, then nodded. "If that's what you want." He walked over slowly. I watched from a distance. He placed the envelope on the table in front of her. She looked up, startled. Noah didn't say anything. He just nodded and walked back to me. Mrs. Aldridge opened the envelope. I couldn't see her face, but I saw her shoulders stiffen. She read it once, then again. Then she folded it carefully and set it down. Noah had shown me the letter earlier. It read, "You once told me I'd never be anything. I thought you might want to see what that looks like now." Simple, honest, devastating. When they announced Noah's name, the auditorium erupted in applause. He walked onto the stage, shaking hands with the presenters, accepting his plaque. I stood in the back, hand over my heart, tears streaming down my face. I looked at Mrs. Aldridge. She was staring at the stage, expression unreadable. But I saw it. The regret. The realization. The weight of what she'd tried to destroy. After the ceremony, people swarmed Noah. Parents, students, reporters. He handled it gracefully, answering questions with the humility I'd taught him. Mrs. Aldridge slipped out quietly. I almost let her go, but something pulled me outside. She was standing by her car, staring at the building. I approached slowly. "Mrs. Aldridge." He turned, eyes red. "Mr. Peterson." We stood in silence. Finally she spoke. "I was wrong." Her voice cracked. "I was wrong about him. About you." He nodded. "Yes, you were." She looked away. "I'm sorry. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to make her feel every ounce of pain she'd caused Noah. But standing there, seeing her broken, I felt something else. Pity. "He didn't need your approval," I said quietly. "But he deserved your respect." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "I know." I turned and walked back inside, leaving her standing in the parking lot. That night, Noah and I sat in the garage, the plaque on the workbench between us. "Dad," he said, "do you think she meant it? The apology?" Thought about it. I think she regrets what she did. Whether that's the same as being sorry, I don't know. He nodded. "I forgave her." I looked at him, surprised. "You did?" "Yeah, not for her. For me." Smiled. "That's very mature." He shrugged. "You taught me that. You taught me that people's opinions don't define me. My work does." I felt my throat tighten. "When did you get so wise?" He grinned. "I learned from the best." We sat in comfortable silence, surrounded by the tools and scraps that had built more than just projects. They'd built confidence, belief, future. Months passed. Noah started high school with scholarship offers already coming in. Mrs. Aldridge retired quietly at the end of the school year. I heard she moved to another state. I never saw her again, but I saw the impact of what we'd built. Noah continued inventing, winning competitions, making a name for himself. Caldwell stayed involved, mentoring him through his teenage years. One evening, Noah asked me, "Do you ever think about what would have happened if I'd believed her?" I set down my wrench. "What do you mean?" "If I'd believed I wasn't smart, that I'd never be anything." Smiled. "You didn't believe her because I didn't let you. And I didn't let you because I knew the truth." He nodded slowly. "Thanks, Dad." "For what?" "For seeing me when no one else did." Years later, I stood in another auditorium watching Noah graduate from MIT with a degree in mechanical engineering. He gave a speech about perseverance, about believing in yourself when the world doesn't. He didn't mention Mrs. Aldridge by name, but I knew who he was talking about. After the ceremony, he found me in the crowd. "We did it," he said, hugging me tightly. "You did it," I corrected. He pulled back, smiling. "No, Dad. We did it. Together." I thought about that parent-teacher meeting all those years ago. The humiliation, the anger, the vow I'd made. Mrs. Aldridge had been wrong about so many things. But she'd been right about one. Noah was never going to be just anything. He was going to be everything. You can't teach belief in a classroom, I realized. You have to live it. And sometimes you have to prove it. Not to the people who doubted you, but to yourself. We walked out into the sunlight together, father and son, ready for whatever came next. If you're reading this because someone told your child they'll never amount to anything, or because you're that child who's been dismissed, underestimated, or written off, this is for you. What happened with Noah and Mrs. Aldridge taught me lessons I never expected to learn. These aren't just feel-good platitudes. They're hard-won truths from the trenches of fighting for a child's future when the system has already decided it's not worth fighting for. Teachers, principals, and counselors have degrees and experience. I'm not dismissing that. But they don't live with your child. They don't see the spark in their eyes when they're passionate about something. They don't hear the questions they ask at midnight or watch them struggle through problems until they find solutions. Mrs. Aldridge had 30 years of experience, and she was dead wrong about my son. Not because she was malicious from the start, but because she'd stopped seeing children as individuals. To her, Noah was a data point, a grade, a statistic that fit her preconceived notion of what success looked like. When a teacher or authority figure tells you your child has minimal potential, ask yourself, what are they basing that on? Standardized tests. Behavior in one specific environment. Their ability to sit still and memorize facts. Those measurements are narrow. They don't capture creativity, resilience, problem-solving, or the kind of intelligence that shows up in a garage with a soldering iron, not in a classroom with a Scantron sheet. Trust your instincts. If you see something in your child that others miss, you're probably right. And even if you're not, believing in them costs nothing and gives them everything. Noah didn't suddenly become brilliant when I started working with him in the garage. He was always brilliant. He just needed an environment where his kind of intelligence was valued. School works for some kids. It didn't work for Noah. The rigid structure, the emphasis on memorization, the timed tests, it all worked against how his brain processed information. But in the garage, surrounded by tools and real-world problems, he thrived. Your job as a parent isn't to force your child into a mold that doesn't fit. It's to discover what mold they're naturally shaped for and help them refine it. Maybe your child isn't a science kid. Maybe they're an artist, a writer, a builder, an athlete, or something that doesn't even have a name yet. Give them access to different experiences. Let them try things and fail. Let them get obsessed with weird hobbies. Pay attention to what makes them lose track of time. That's where their gifts live. For us, it was mechanics and engineering. For your child, it might be music, coding, gardening, storytelling, or something else entirely. The point is to create space, physical, emotional, and mental, for them to explore without judgment. This might sound cynical, but in a world where authority figures can make or break your child's opportunities, documentation is your greatest weapon. When Noah's wind turbine disappeared and reappeared as another student's project, I had no proof. When Mrs. Aldridge filed an anonymous complaint accusing us of cheating, I almost didn't have enough evidence to fight back. Almost. I started keeping records of everything. Photos of Noah working. Timestamps on videos. His notebooks filled with sketches and notes in his own handwriting. Testimonies from people like Caldwell who'd witnessed his process. When the appeals panel reviewed our case, that documentation saved us. Without it, it would have been our word against a 30-year veteran teacher's reputation. If your child is being unfairly targeted, discriminated against, or undermined, document it. Save emails. Record dates and times of conversations. Take photos and videos. Keep a journal. It feels tedious and paranoid, but when you need it, you'll be grateful you have it. Caldwell changed everything for Noah. Not because he was smarter than me or cared more, but because he was an external validator. He was someone with credentials and experience who saw what I saw. Sometimes, children need to hear belief from someone other than their parents. Not because our belief doesn't matter, but because the world has taught them to question it. Of course my dad thinks I'm smart. He's my dad. But when a retired NASA engineer says, "You've got something special," that lands differently. Look for mentors in your community. Retired professionals, college students, hobbyist groups, community centers, libraries. People who have expertise in areas your child is interested in and who are willing to invest time in young people. These mentors don't just teach skills. They provide perspective. They show your child that there's a world beyond the narrow hallways of their school, beyond the opinions of one dismissive teacher. And honestly, they provide validation for you too. When Caldwell testified on Noah's behalf, it wasn't just about clearing Noah's name. It was proof that I wasn't delusional, that I wasn't just a defensive parent making excuses. My son really did have talent. This is the hardest lesson and the most important one. Noah asked me once if Mrs. Aldridge was right about him. That question broke my heart because it revealed how deeply her words had cut. She wasn't just wrong about his abilities. She'd made him doubt his inherent worth as a person. Children are incredibly vulnerable to adult opinions, especially from authority figures. When a teacher says, "You're not good enough," a child doesn't hear, "You didn't do well on this test." They hear, "You are fundamentally flawed." You have to counteract that message constantly and consistently. Not with empty praise. Kids see through that, but with evidence-based truth. You worked on that project for 3 weeks without giving up. That's resilience. You figured out a problem I couldn't solve. That's intelligence. You treated that kid kindly even after he stole your idea. That's character. Remind them that their worth isn't determined by grades, awards, or other people's approval. It's inherent. They matter because they exist, because they're human, because they're yours. And model it yourself. Show them that you don't need Mrs. Aldridge's approval either. That you measure success by effort, growth, and integrity, not by external validation. I wanted to destroy Mrs. Aldridge. I wanted to humiliate her the way she'd humiliated Noah. But revenge is a trap. Keeps you tied to the person who hurt you. Excellence, on the other hand, is freedom. Every hour I spent plotting how to expose her was an hour I wasn't spending helping Noah build something great. So I redirected that energy. We focused on the work. On getting better. On proving, not to her but to ourselves, that we were capable of more than she imagined. And here's the beautiful irony. Excellence is the most powerful form of revenge. Not because it hurts the other person, but because it makes them irrelevant. When Noah won that national award, Mrs. Aldridge's opinion stopped mattering. She could apologize or not, acknowledge her mistake or not. It didn't change the fact that Noah had succeeded despite her, not because of her. If someone is undermining your child, don't waste energy trying to change their mind. Put that energy into building your child up. Success is louder than any argument you could make. The letter Noah gave Mrs. Aldridge wasn't my idea. I didn't even know he'd written it until the day of the gala. Part of me wanted to confront her myself, to make a dramatic speech, to force her to acknowledge what she'd done. But that would have been about my ego, not Noah's healing. When Noah handed her that envelope, it was his moment, his voice, his closure. As parents, we want to fight every battle for our kids. But sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is step back and let them fight their own battles in their own way. Noah didn't scream at Mrs. Aldridge. He didn't publicly shame her. He quietly, calmly, handed her proof that she'd been wrong. That restraint, that dignity. I couldn't have taught him that. He learned it by watching me choose patience over anger, persistence over retaliation. Give your child opportunities to advocate for themselves. Let them write the email to the teacher. Let them present their case to the principal. Stand behind them, support them, intervene if necessary. But let them lead when they're ready. That's how they learn they're not victims. They're agents of their own story. The gala was incredible. The awards, the recognition, the vindication, it all felt amazing. But you know what mattered more? The nights in the garage. The quiet conversations. The moments when Noah figured something out on his own and his whole face lit up. The goal was never to prove Mrs. Aldridge wrong. The goal was to help Noah become the fullest version of himself. If he'd never won a single award, if we'd never gotten external validation, he still would have grown. He still would have learned resilience, creativity, and self-belief. Those are the real prizes. So if you're in the middle of this fight right now, if your child is struggling and the system is failing them, remember, you're not doing this for revenge or validation. You're doing it because your child deserves to know they're capable of extraordinary things. And whether the world ever recognizes it or not, That truth is worth fighting for.